There is a kind of strength that does not announce itself. It does not rise above the crowd. It does not demand attention. It doesn't need to. It lives quietly in the people who speak less, who observe more, who feel deeply but move calmly. For most of their lives, these people are misunderstood. Their silence is mistaken for insecurity, their softness mistaken for weakness, their quiet nature seen as something that needs to be fixed. But the truth is different. The truth is quieter and far more powerful. Quiet souls are not weak. Quiet souls are aware. They notice things others rush past. They think before they speak. They understand emotions without announcing their own. This chapter is about reclaiming that strength, because the world often rewards noise. It celebrates those who speak quickly, loudly, constantly. And it convinces many quiet people that something is wrong with them, but influence, real influence, has never belonged to the loudest voice. It belongs to the one people feel when they walk into a room, the one who does not need to perform to be taken seriously, the one whose silence itself has weight. Psychologists call this low reactive presence, a state where a person's nervous system is calm, grounded, and regulated. People with this presence don't need many words. Their energy communicates before their voice ever does. Think of the people you've respected most in your life, not the ones who tried the hardest, but the ones who carried themselves with a quiet, steady certainty. Quiet people influenced by being, not by performing. That is a power you may not have recognized in yourself yet, but it is there, and it has always been there. You don't need to speak more to become influential. You need to understand what your silence already says. Because silence doesn't mean emptiness. Silence means intentionality. It means control. It means maturity. You aren't quiet because you have nothing to say. You are quiet because you don't waste words. You don't interrupt because you are listening. You don't over-explain because you trust your own thoughts. You don't shout because you don't need to overpower anyone. And when you do speak, your words carry more weight precisely because you do not use them often. A person who talks constantly creates noise. A person who speaks selectively creates impact. This chapter is your reminder that your nature is not a disadvantage. It is a form of intelligence, a form of emotional depth, a form of restraint that most people never learn. But to use this strength well, you must understand it. You must own it. And you must stop apologizing for it. When you stop trying to be loud, you become powerful. When you stop trying to be understood by everyone, you become memorable. When you stop filling silence with fear, your silence becomes your influence. Quiet people are not invisible. They are unforgettable in a different way. Their presence lingers. Their words echo. Their attention feels rare and therefore valuable. In the chapters ahead, you will learn how to use this quiet strength intentionally, not to dominate conversations, but to guide them, shape them, and influence them with calm precision. But everything begins here, with recognizing that who you already are is enough to command respect. Your quietness is not a flaw. It is the foundation of your influence. And from this point forward, you will no longer shrink from it. You will step into it. Chapter 2. When pauses become wisdom, there is a moment, a brief, quiet, almost invisible moment, where influence begins. It is not when you speak. It is the moment before you speak. The moment where your mind settles, your breath slows, and you give yourself permission to respond instead of react. Most people rush past this moment. They leap from stimulus to response without awareness. A question is asked. They answer immediately. A comment is made. They feel the need to fill the space. A disagreement appears. They defend themselves without thinking. They speak because silence feels uncomfortable. They talk because it seems safer than waiting. They react because reacting feels quicker than choosing. But when you pause, when you resist that impulse, something inside you shifts. A pause is not the absence of words. A pause is the presence of control. It is the place where wisdom forms, the psychology of the pause. Psychologists have long understood that the human mind processes emotion faster than logic. We feel before we think. We react before we reflect. A pause interrupts that automatic cycle. It creates a pocket of space where your emotional brain calms down and your rational mind wakes up. In neuroscience, this is known as response inhibition, the ability to delay your first instinct so you can choose a better one. People who master this skill appear wiser, calmer, and more trustworthy. Not because they know more, but because they think more before they act. And this is the real secret. Most people do not pause at all. So the ones who do stand out immediately. A 3-second pause can change the entire tone of a conversation. It can shift you from sounding rushed to sounding thoughtful, from sounding unsure to sounding composed, from sounding reactive to sounding intentional. The pause gives your words gravity. Why most people fear pauses. To understand the power of a pause, you must first understand why so few people use them. Most people equate silence with weakness. They fear that if they don't answer immediately, someone will think they are confused, or unintelligent, or lying, or insecure. In reality, silence communicates the opposite. Silence communicates self-possession. Silence communicates clarity. Silence communicates emotional maturity. Think of the last time someone asked you a question and you felt an immediate pressure to respond. That tightness in your chest, that urge to fill the space, that fear of being judged. That feeling is not wisdom, it is conditioning. Growing up, many people were taught, speak up quickly, don't leave people waiting, have an answer ready, don't be awkward. They weren't taught to think. They were taught to perform. So the pause feels unnatural, uncomfortable, risky. But here's the truth that only a few people ever realize. A pause is not awkward. A pause is powerful. The person who pauses takes ownership of the direction. They redefine the pace of the conversation. They bring calm to the moment. They show that they are not controlled by urgency or pressure. This is why therapists, negotiators, and leaders all intentionally use silence. The pause is not empty. It is full of meaning. Pausing changes how people perceive you. When you pause before speaking, people assume 3 things. 1, you are thinking deeply. Even if your thoughts are simple, the pause signals internal processing. You appear more thoughtful, more deliberate, more careful with your words. 2, you are emotionally regulated. Pausing shows you are not controlled by your emotions. You respond from composure, not reactivity. 3, you are confident enough not to rush. Confidence is not speed. Confidence is pacing. The person who pauses communicates, I'm not afraid of silence. I'm in control of myself. These 3 impressions alone dramatically increase your influence. People trust calm people. People are drawn to self-regulated people. People respect those who don't rush to fill the air. A pause makes you appear wiser, even when you say less. How pauses protect you. A pause is not only a tool of influence, it is a tool of self-protection. When you pause, you give yourself time to evaluate the situation, time to notice emotional triggers, time to recognize manipulation patterns, time to decide whether speaking is even necessary. Many arguments, misunderstandings, and regrets could have been prevented if a single pause had existed. A pause is the doorway to self-control. Without it, you speak emotionally. With it, you speak intentionally. Without it, you react to pressure. With it, you shape the moment. Without it, others control the pace. With it, you reclaim your agency. The pause gives you your power back. The emotional impact of pausing. Pausing is not just cognitive. It is emotional. It changes how you feel in your body. It reduces the adrenaline that pushes you to talk. It slows your breathing. It grounds your nervous system. When you pause, you experience a feeling many people rarely taste: inner spaciousness. The sense that you are not squeezed by the moment, but expanded within it. When you practice pausing regularly, your emotional baseline shifts. You no longer feel rushed by life. You no longer feel trapped in conversations. You no longer feel controlled by urgency. You begin to enjoy the feeling of internal quiet, a quiet that strengthens instead of weakens. You become someone who moves slower, thinks deeper, and speaks clearer. People begin to notice your calmness. They begin to listen more closely. They begin to value your words. Why? Because they can feel that your words come from inside you, and not from pressure outside you. Pausing changes your relationships. You can watch relationships transform simply by using intentional pauses. When someone speaks to you with intensity, pause. When someone tries to provoke you, pause. When someone asks a difficult question, pause. When someone tells you something emotional, pause. When someone seeks a reaction, pause. The pause communicates, I'm not here to match your chaos. I'm here to understand what's really happening. This creates safety. It builds trust. People feel calmer around you. They feel more heard, more valued, more respected. The pause tells them, you matter enough for me to think before I respond. Conversations become smoother. Arguments soften. Misunderstandings decrease. Connection deepens. Stillness creates closeness. Pausing strengthens your identity. When you pause before speaking, you reinforce a sense of inner authority. You teach your mind, my thoughts are worth considering. My words are worth waiting for. My presence sets the pace. This reprograms your relationship with yourself. You stop feeling pressured to perform for others. You stop feeling rushed to match someone's energy. You stop feeling obligated to respond immediately. You develop what psychologists call internal locus of control. The belief that you, not external forces, determine your behavior. This is one of the strongest predictors of resilience, confidence, emotional stability, leadership influence. Pausing strengthens the identity of a calm, grounded person who chooses their words with intention. How to use pauses in everyday life. Pauses are small, but they must be practiced intentionally until they become natural. Here are ways to integrate them. 1. Before answering a question, pause for a moment, take a breath, let your thoughts gather, then speak. The question doesn't disappear, it becomes clearer. 2. When someone challenges you, pause. Don't defend, don't react, don't explain immediately. Let the moment settle. You will see the situation more clearly. 3. When you feel triggered, pause. This pause alone prevents defensive responses. It gives you the chance to respond from maturity instead of pain. 4. Before sharing your opinion, pause. Consider if your words add value. You will find yourself speaking less and being respected more. 5. When conversations speed up, pause. Slowing your pace will influence theirs. You become the anchor in the room. Small pauses create massive shifts. The power of the 3 types of pauses. There are 3 forms of pauses that shape conversations. Each one changes interactions in a different way. 1. The internal pause before you speak. This is the private pause, the one no one sees, the one that steadies your nervous system and clarifies your thoughts. Internal pauses create wisdom. 2. The conversational pause while speaking. These are the small breaks in your sentences. They make your speech feel calm and intentional. Conversational pauses create clarity. They make people lean in. They help you sound composed, thoughtful, and grounded. 3. The strategic pause after someone else speaks. This is the most powerful pause of all. When someone finishes talking and you remain silent for a moment, they reveal more. They clarify themselves. They soften. They rethink their intensity. Strategic pauses create influence. This is how therapists guide conversations. This is how negotiators create advantage. This is how leaders build presence. Pauses reshape not only how you speak, but how others speak to you. Pausing makes your words feel more valuable. People value what is rare. People value what requires effort. People value what feels intentional. If you speak quickly and constantly, your words blend into the noise. If you speak slowly and selectively, your words become memorable. A pause makes the listener pay attention. It signals that something meaningful is coming. It primes the mind to listen more deeply. Even if you say something simple, the pause gives it weight. A pause creates gravity. It turns a sentence into a message, a thought into wisdom, a moment into influence. The emotional journey of learning to pause. Learning to pause is not just a technique, it is a transformation. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. You will feel exposed in the silence. You will worry about how others perceive you. You will feel the urge to fill the space. This is normal. Your mind is detoxing from years of rushing, performing, and reacting. With practice, something shifts. The silence stops feeling threatening. It starts feeling powerful, comfortable, grounded. Eventually, you begin to crave the pause. It becomes your anchor in conversations, your shield in conflict, your compass in emotional moments. The pause becomes home. And that is when your influence becomes undeniable, becoming someone others. Respect instinctively, people respect those who do not rush, those who do not react instantly, those who can hold themselves steady when others cannot. A person who pauses before responding radiates a quiet authority. They feel like someone you can trust, someone who thinks clearly, someone who won't lose control, someone who doesn't need to prove anything. This is the kind of person people look to for guidance, the kind people follow, the kind people confide in. The pause builds a reputation for maturity, a reputation for depth, a reputation for influence. The pause is the beginning of your power. Everything that this audiobook teaches, every chapter that follows, every form of influence you will learn, all of it rests on this skill. Because the pause is where you gain control over yourself. And influence always begins with self-control. When you pause, you choose your words instead of letting fear choose them. You choose your tone instead of letting emotion choose it. You choose your pace instead of letting pressure decide it. The pause empowers you to become the calmest person in any room. And the calmest person is almost always the most influential. This chapter is the foundation of that transformation. By mastering the pause, you begin to master your presence. By mastering your presence, you begin to master your influence. Chapter 3. Hearing what others don't say. Most people move through conversations believing that communication happens through words alone. They listen for sentences, for explanations, and for opinions. They track what someone chooses to say, and they take it at face value. But real communication is rarely verbal. Most of what people reveal is not in their words, but in everything surrounding those words. The tone, the pauses, the shifts, the silence, the small corrections, the emotional tremors that most ears never notice. People will show you their inner world long before they speak it, if you learn how to see it. Quiet people have a natural sensitivity to these layers, even if they have never been taught how to use it. They sense tension before it becomes visible. They notice subtle changes in someone's energy. They catch the small inconsistencies that others glide over. This chapter trains that natural sensitivity into a deliberate skill, a way of hearing truth beneath noise and meaning beneath language. To influence without speaking much, you must learn to perceive what others don't say. Because the deeper your understanding becomes, the less you need to talk, signals beneath the words. Words are the surface of communication, the shell. Signals are the substance inside. A person might speak confidently, while their hands tremble without their awareness. They might say they're fine, but their breathing becomes shallow. They might insist they're not upset, yet their eyes flicker with contradiction. These signals are not accidents, they are emotional data. Your nervous system recognizes them instantly, even if your conscious mind does not. This is why you sometimes feel something is wrong without knowing why. Your body picks up signals long before your thoughts can decode them. When you start paying attention to signals, the micropause before an answer, the shift in posture, the tightness in someone's voice, you begin to hear the emotional truth through the. You hear the fears people hide. You hear the uncertainty they try to bury. You hear the longing they're afraid to express. Quiet influence comes from responding to that truth rather than the words meant to conceal it. The mind must slow down. To hear deeply, you must first become internally quiet. Most people cannot read subtle emotional cues because their minds are too loud. They think of their next response. They anticipate judgment. They rush to fill silence. Their thoughts compete with the other person's voice. Your internal noise is the greatest barrier to deep listening. When you slow your mind, something shifts. You become less reactive. Your attention expands. Your senses sharpen. You begin to observe without intruding, understand without interrupting, sense without assuming. In this calmness, the emotional texture of conversations reveals itself effortlessly. You notice how someone inhales before answering. You notice when their tone lowers at the exact moment they lie to themselves. You notice when their smile doesn't reach their eyes. You notice when confidence is real and when it's a shield. Inner quiet becomes outer clarity. Emotional attunement. Attunement is the ability to sync your emotional awareness with someone else's emotional state, not by mirroring them, but by understanding them. It allows you to pick up on micro expressions, subtle hesitation, small inconsistencies. Someone pauses before finishing their thought. That pause is information. Someone laughs quickly to avoid vulnerability, and that laugh is a message. Someone repeats a phrase unnecessarily. That repetition is a signal of uncertainty. You begin to understand that every conversation contains three levels: what they say, what they mean, what they feel. Most people never reach the third level, but influence exists there, in the emotional layer. That layer controls decisions, reactions, trust, closeness, and openness. When you become attuned, your presence alone feels different. People feel like they don't need to explain themselves as much. They feel understood without trying. They soften around you because you don't force them into the discomfort of being misunderstood. This is where quiet people shine. The language of silence. Silence is not empty. Silence is expressive. Sometimes silence means fear. Sometimes silence means longing. Sometimes silence means someone is holding back tears. Sometimes silence means trust is being tested. When you become comfortable with silence, you can finally hear what lives inside it. Most people break silence too quickly. They rush to fill it. They try to make the moment easier, but in doing so, they interrupt something real. If you allow silence to breathe, the truth rises gently to the surface. People begin to reveal more without realizing why. Silence gives them space to find their real thoughts, not the ones they plan to share. Silence invites honesty. Quiet influence grows in silence. Not because silence is forceful, but because it is safe. Depth over surface. To hear what others don't say, you cannot rush. Depth does not appear in speed. Depth appears when you sit long enough to see what stands behind someone's behavior. A person raising their voice might be masking insecurity. A person shutting down might be protecting themselves. A person who brags might, terrified of inadequacy. A person who avoids eye contact might be carrying shame. A person who jokes constantly might be hiding sadness. When you listen deeply, the behavior stops confusing you. You stop overreacting to the surface because you understand the root. You begin responding to the emotion, not the performance. This is the essence of emotional intelligence. The ability to understand what a moment actually means, not just what it looks like. And the more you understand, the less reactive you become, the listener people trust. There's a reason people open up more to calm, quiet individuals. It's not because quiet people say the perfect thing. It's because quiet people don't break the emotional space. A loud or anxious presence makes others guard themselves. A calm presence makes others reveal themselves. Deep listening communicates, "You're safe here. I'm not judging you. I'm not rushing you. You don't need to pretend." When people sense that safety, their defenses fall. They begin to speak from their real self, not their practiced self. They confide in you because they feel seen without being pushed. This kind of trust cannot be bought, forced, or demanded. It is earned through presence, not performance. And when people trust your presence, your influence grows naturally and quietly. Understanding the hidden emotion. Behind every behavior is an emotion, and behind every emotion is a need. Anger often hides fear. Control often hides insecurity. Withdrawal often hides disappointment. Defensiveness often hides hurt. Perfectionism often hides shame. Sarcasm often hides vulnerability. Indifference often hides longing. When you learn to hear the emotion behind the words, you no longer take behavior personally. You no longer get pulled into unnecessary conflict. You no longer feel responsible for other people's reactions. Instead, you become grounded. You see clearly. You react maturely. You begin to feel compassion, not confusion. Clarity, not chaos. Strength, not defensiveness. This is emotional mastery through understanding. The listener who shapes conversations. A person who listens deeply shapes the entire direction of a conversation without saying much. They slow the pace. They bring openness. They create depth. Their presence alone influences how the other person speaks, feels, and reveals themselves. When you listen at this level, you don't need to dominate the conversation. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to talk more to be valued. Influence becomes effortless. People feel drawn to your calm. They begin adjusting to your rhythm. They speak with more sincerity. They think before responding. They open up in ways they rarely do with others. You guide the entire interaction with quiet presence alone, hearing without absorbing. Deep listening does not mean carrying the emotional weight of others. It means understanding their emotions without letting them control yours. There's a difference between empathy and emotional absorption. Empathy understands. Absorption internalizes. Quiet influence depends on the separation of the two. You must hear clearly without drowning in someone else's storm. When you can listen deeply while staying grounded, you gain emotional strength. You remain steady even when others are shaking. You offer stability without being consumed by the instability. This is true emotional discipline, the strength of perception. When you learn to hear what others don't say, your relationships change. Your communication changes. Your confidence changes. Your influence changes. You become someone who sees beneath the surface, someone who isn't manipulated by tone or theatrics, someone who understands intention beyond words, someone who responds from depth rather than ego, someone who people naturally trust. Quiet influence grows from perception, not volume. This chapter is the doorway to that perception. It is the point where conversations stop being confusing and start becoming clear, where people stop being overwhelming and start becoming understandable, where your quiet nature stops feeling like a disadvantage and starts revealing itself as emotional intelligence. You don't need to talk more to influence others. You need to understand them more deeply. This is the beginning of that understanding. Chapter 4. Words chosen like stones. Intentional. Precise, unshakable. Most people speak without intention. They talk to fill silence, to reduce their anxiety, to feel included, or to avoid seeming unsure. They release words like feathers in the wind, light, scattered, directionless. But a person who speaks less learns something profound, that words can carry the weight of stones when chosen carefully. When you become selective with your speech, something shifts inside you. Suddenly, you are not speaking to react, but to shape. Not speaking to be heard, but to mean something. Not speaking automatically, but deliberately. Intentional communication isn't about being perfect. It's about being conscious. Every word becomes a decision rather than an impulse. And decisions carry weight. Impulses do not. Quiet people grow powerful when they begin treating their words like a scarce resource, something valuable, something precious, something worth guarding. This chapter is about transforming your relationship with speech so that every word you choose becomes an extension of your identity and not a leak in your energy. Breaking the habit of automatic speech. Human beings are conditioned to respond quickly. From childhood, people are praised for instant answers, fast reactions, and quick responses. Pausing was framed as uncertainty, silence as awkwardness, slowness as weakness. So automatic speech became the default. Questions provoke immediate answers. Comments provoke immediate explanations. Conflict provokes immediate defense. The unconscious mind takes over before intention ever has a chance to form. But influence is never automatic. It is crafted. It is intentional. It is deliberate. Breaking the habit of automatic speech begins with awareness. You start to notice when you speak out of discomfort instead of clarity. You notice when you talk to fill a gap rather than to contribute meaningfully. You notice when your voice rises not from confidence, but from insecurity. This awareness becomes a filter, a pause, a moment of inner checking. And in that moment, you gain control over your words. You begin to speak from choice rather than conditioning. This is where influence begins, the power of fewer words. There is a reason ancient leaders, monks, negotiators, and thinkers spoke slowly and sparsely. They knew something modern people forget, that the mind values what is not handed out freely. When you speak constantly, your words lose impact. When you speak sparingly, your words gain weight. The human brain is wired to notice rarity. Rarity signals importance. It signals value. It signals meaning. If you speak only when necessary, people begin to listen more carefully. They lean in. They become attentive. They anticipate insight. Your silence becomes part of your message. Your restraint becomes part of your strength. You do not need to say more to influence more. You need to say less with more intention. Clarity over volume. People equate talking with influence, but influence comes from clarity, not quantity. The most powerful sentences in history were short. The most life-changing advice was simple. The most unforgettable lines were precise. Clarity begins when you remove unnecessary words, words that soften your message, words that dilute your point, words spoken out of fear of being direct. When you strip your speech to its core, your message becomes stronger. You no longer cloud your intentions with excess. You no longer defend yourself with layers of explanation. You no longer complicate your communication to seek approval. Clarity gives your voice structure. It gives your mind edge. It gives your presence authority. People respect those who speak with clarity because clarity signals internal strength. It signals self-respect. It signals emotional stability. When your words are clear, people feel safe around you. When your words are vague, people feel uncertain. Choose clarity, and people will feel your confidence without needing you to perform it. The fear behind over-explaining. Many people speak too much because they fear being misunderstood. They pile on explanations, justifications, reasons, and apologies, hoping the extra words will protect them from judgment. But over-explaining does the opposite. It signals insecurity. It signals self-doubt. It signals a lack of internal authority. When you over-explain, you teach others that your confidence can be shaken. You teach them that you need their approval. You teach them that your decisions require external validation. Quiet influence grows when you stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. Not every decision needs justification. Not every boundary needs a story. Not every feeling needs a defense. Your words become stronger the moment you stop using them to shield your fear. You reclaim your inner authority when you speak from self-trust rather than self-protection. This is one of the biggest shifts of emotional maturity. Speaking less because you no longer need permission to be who you are. Choosing words with precision. Precision is not stiffness. Precision is alignment. The alignment between your thoughts, your values, and your speech. When your speech matches your inner truth, you become powerful without raising your voice. Precision means saying exactly what you mean without the extra weight. It means choosing words that match your intention. It means communicating from strength rather than fear. Here's what precision sounds like. Instead of rambling, you state your point. Instead of defending, you clarify. Instead of apologizing unnecessarily, you acknowledge and move on. Instead of softening yourself to comfort others, you speak kindly but directly. Precision removes emotional fog from your communication. It makes your presence more defined, like a shape emerging from mist. People trust precise speakers because precision signals inner clarity. They know you are not hiding. They know you are not manipulating. They know you are not insecure. Precision is integrity made audible. The voice grounded in self-respect. There is a difference between people who speak to please and people who speak from self-respect. When your words come from a place of self-respect, they are steady, they are calm, they are firm, they are grounded. You do not overstep your own boundaries, and you do not invade the boundaries of others. Self-respect shows in the tone of your voice. It shows in your pacing. It shows in your choice of words. It shows in your silence as well. People respond differently to someone who speaks from self-respect. They feel the difference instinctively. They take your words seriously. They treat you with more consideration. They adjust their tone without being asked. Your energy teaches them how to speak to you. Your speech teaches them how to approach you. This is the quiet strength of intentional communication when words become mirrors. Your words reflect your inner life. They reflect your emotional maturity, your self-awareness, your boundaries, your values, your past experiences, your fears, and your healing. When you learn to speak with intention, your words begin to reflect the strongest parts of you, not the wounded parts. Instead of reacting from old scars, you respond from clarity. Instead of letting insecurity shape your sentences, you let confidence shape them. Instead of letting fear spill out, you let calmness guide your tone. Your speech becomes a mirror of your growth. Others may not consciously know why they feel drawn to your voice, but they will feel it. They will feel the steadiness in your tone, the groundedness in your pacing, the maturity in your choice of words. Your words become an extension of your healing, speaking only when necessary. The world is full of excess words, opinions offered without thought, arguments spoken without reflection, noise disguised as communication. But a person who speaks only when necessary cuts through the noise effortlessly. Their words arrive with purpose. Their voice carries intention. Their silence holds more meaning than others' speeches. Speaking less is not withdrawal. It is refinement. It is discipline. It is wisdom. When you speak only when necessary, people treat your voice like a signal, not background noise. They pay attention to your pauses. They consider your perspective carefully. They value your contribution because it is not habitual. It is chosen. Necessity gives your words gravity. Becoming a person of verbal integrity. Verbal integrity means your words match your values. It means you speak honestly, not to please, not to impress, not to convince, but to express truthfully and respectfully. People with verbal integrity are rare. Most people say whatever prevents conflict in the moment. Most speak from convenience, not conviction. Most bend their words to fit the emotional atmosphere. But when your speech matches your values, you become reliable, predictable, in the best way, steady even in pressure, clear even in confusion. People trust those whose words stay connected to their truth. This trust is the foundation of quiet influence. Unshakable presence through intentional speech. When your words become intentional, your presence becomes unshakable. Not loud, not forceful, not dominant, but deeply grounded. People sense that you do not waste energy. You do not speak without meaning. You do not react without awareness. You do not let emotion hijack your voice. Your speech becomes an extension of your self-control. And people instinctively respect self-control. They may not understand why your presence feels different, but they feel it. It calms them. It anchors them. It shapes the entire atmosphere of the conversation. Your words, carefully chosen, intentionally placed, emotionally grounded, become pillars in the interaction. You do not need to shout. You do not need to convince. You do not need to impress. Your intention impresses for you. Chapter 5. The calm that changes rooms. Some people walk into a room and their presence amplifies the noise. Their energy is scattered, reactive, and tense. They speak quickly, move anxiously, and bring a kind of emotional turbulence that others subconsciously absorb. But there is another type of person, one who enters a room and softens the atmosphere without saying a single word. Their calmness spreads quietly. Their composure stabilizes others. Their presence becomes a point of grounding that people instinctively orient themselves around. This kind of influence does not come from authority or appearance or status. It comes from emotional stillness. It comes from an inner steadiness that cannot be easily shaken. It comes from a nervous system that is regulated, mature, and anchored. Quiet people have the potential to embody this stillness more than anyone else, not because they avoid conflict, but because they feel deeply, think deeply, and naturally seek emotional balance. This chapter teaches you how to turn that potential into a conscious form of influence, where your calmness becomes a force strong enough to shift the emotional temperature of any environment you enter. Why emotional composure matters. Most people live in a state of low-level anxiety. Their internal world is crowded with stress, comparison, and unresolved emotions. They react before thinking. They snap when pressured. They get defensive when misunderstood. Their mood rises and falls based on whatever happens around them. In psychology, this is known as external emotional regulation, when your inner state depends on your environment. But influential people operate differently. They regulate from within. They do not let the room control their emotions. They let their emotions control the room, not through force, but through presence. When a person remains calm in tension, others instinctively follow that calm. When a person remains grounded during conflict, others begin to soften. When a person refuses to mirror chaos, they transform the environment itself. This is emotional leadership, a leadership expressed not through words, but through nervous system stability. What you stabilize inside yourself stabilizes others. The nervous system and influence. Emotional influence begins in the body, not the mind. When your nervous system is regulated, you think more clearly, speak more calmly, listen more deeply, and perceive more accurately. But when your nervous system is dysregulated, when adrenaline spikes, when fear rises, when tension builds, your ability to influence collapses. Instead of responding, you react. Instead of thinking, you defend. Instead of choosing, you panic. Instead of leading, you follow emotional impulses. Calmness is not a personality trait. It is a trained state of the nervous system. And when someone can maintain that state even under pressure, the human brain registers them as safe, as trustworthy, as strong, as worth listening to. People do not consciously think, this person is calm, therefore I trust them. Their body simply relaxes around you. Their tone softens. Their defenses drop. Their pace slows. You become the emotional thermostat of the room instead of the emotional sponge, not matching the chaos. Most people mirror the emotions shown to them. When someone is angry, they become defensive. When someone is stressed, they become anxious. When someone is loud, they raise their voice. When someone is overwhelmed, they become reactive. This mirroring is instinctive, a survival pattern rooted in the brain's need for social adaptation. But it makes you easy to manipulate, easy to provoke, easy to destabilize. Quiet influence is built on the opposite principle. Do not mirror the chaos. Anchor yourself in calmness instead. When you don't react emotionally to someone else's volatility, you subtly take control of the dynamic, not through dominance, but through emotional sovereignty. You refuse to get pulled into their storm, and your refusal creates a kind of emotional gravity. People subconsciously align with the calmest energy in the interaction, and that energy becomes yours. Staying centered during conflict. Conflict is where most people lose their composure. Their breathing quickens, their heartbeat rises, their voice sharpens, their mind becomes foggy or defensive. They speak too quickly, say too much, or shut down entirely. But when you stay calm in conflict, you become the rare presence that others pay attention to. You don't react to accusations. You don't get pulled into emotional traps. You don't defend out of insecurity. You don't over-explain to appear right. Instead, you observe. You breathe. You think. You maintain internal stability. This is incredibly disarming, not because it is confrontational, but because it reveals a level of self-control others do not possess. Your calm presence communicates, I am steady, I cannot be thrown, I respond on my terms, not yours. This alone changes the entire tone of the conversation. The strength of emotional detachment. Emotional detachment is not coldness. It is clarity. It is the ability to step back from your emotions, observe them without being controlled by them, and choose your response with intention. When you are emotionally detached in tense situations, you can see the truth beneath the drama. You can hear the pain behind someone's anger. You can understand the fear behind someone's hostility. You can recognize the insecurity behind someone's arrogance. You stop reacting to the surface. You respond to the emotion underneath. This makes you powerful without needing to dominate. It makes you wise without needing to lecture. It makes you grounded without needing to defend. Your emotional detachment becomes a form of protection, a boundary made of calmness, when calmness becomes authority. People instinctively trust the calmest person in the room, not because calmness is impressive, but because calmness feels safe. The human body detects emotional stability the way it detects warmth or danger. When someone is grounded, others gravitate toward them. When someone is centered, others follow their pace. When someone is composed under pressure, others feel protected. Authority is not always about speaking. Sometimes it is about being. Your calmness becomes the anchor. Your breathing becomes the rhythm. Your tone becomes the guide. Your presence becomes the stability others lean on. This is how quiet people rise into leadership without ever asking for it. Their calmness speaks for them, refusing emotional invitations. Throughout life, people will repeatedly invite you into their emotional storms. They will invite you into arguments, into defensiveness, into impatience, into panic, into insecurity. You are not obligated to accept any of these invitations. Every moment you choose. Will you join their chaos or remain in your calm? Emotional invitations sound like, why aren't you reacting? So you don't care? Aren't you going to say something? Do you just agree with them? You're being too calm right now. These are attempts to pull you out of your center. But your influence grows when you decline these invitations. Storms do not pull in mountains. Mountains remain unmoved, becoming the safe presence. Calm people become safe places. Not because they rescue others, but because they don't make situations worse. People feel safe opening up to them, safe expressing emotion, safe being vulnerable, safe slowing down. A safe presence is not passive. It is powerful. It is stabilizing. It brings out honesty and connection. Many people have never experienced a calm presence in their lives. Someone who doesn't react, who doesn't escalate, who doesn't get overwhelmed by emotion. When they finally meet someone like that, they remember it. You become memorable not because you impress them, but because you become the calm they didn't know they needed. Calmness creates space. When you are calm, you create emotional space for others. Space for them to think. Space for them to breathe. Space for them to express themselves. Space for the truth to emerge. Most conversations are crowded with anticipation, pressure, and defensiveness. But a calm presence slows the pace. It opens the moment. It gives room for clarity. People find themselves saying things they never planned to say. They unfold emotionally in ways they didn't expect. They discover parts of themselves they've been avoiding. Your calmness becomes the space where truth can exist, unshakable presence in everyday life. Calmness is not just for conflict. It influences everyday interactions. When someone speaks loudly, you speak more softly. When someone tries to rush you, you slow your pace. When someone wants drama, you remain neutral. When someone projects fear, you project stability. When someone panics, you breathe deeper. These tiny acts of emotional mastery accumulate into something huge, an unshakable presence. People begin to adjust to your rhythm. They subconsciously regulate their own nervous system to match yours. They feel grounded around you. This is more than influence. This is emotional leadership at the deepest level, the calm that transforms you. The more you practice calmness, the more you become someone you respect. You become someone who does not lose themselves in chaos, someone who does not break under pressure, someone who chooses response over reaction, someone who owns their internal world. This creates a quiet pride, a deep confidence, a mature strength. Calmness stops being something you do. It becomes who you are. Chapter 6, The Art of Saying Less Without Apology. The Weight of Unnecessary Apologies. Many people speak from a place of quiet guilt, a subtle, lingering belief that they owe others explanations, apologies, and justifications for simply existing. They apologize for taking time, for expressing needs, for setting boundaries, for having emotions, for changing their mind, for being busy, for not responding immediately, for wanting something different than what others expect. This habit begins young. Children are praised for being agreeable, polite, compliant. They learn early that discomfort must be soothed, that silence must be filled, that boundaries must be softened. They learn that the way to avoid conflict is to apologize preemptively, to explain excessively, to shrink themselves to fit the emotional expectations of others. But adulthood reveals a truth that many never learn. You do not owe the world constant explanations. You do not owe apologies for existing, for thinking, for choosing, for needing, for resting, for protecting your peace. The art of saying less, of speaking with calm certainty and without apology, is not arrogance. It is maturity. It is emotional self-respect. It is the recognition that your presence does not need justification. This chapter teaches you how to remove the invisible chains of over-explaining so that your words come from confidence rather than fear, and your silence comes from strength rather than guilt. Why people over-explain. Over-explaining is rarely about communication. It is about fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being judged. Fear of disappointing someone. fear of conflict, fear of appearing rude, fear of seeming unprepared, fear of being rejected. At its core, over-explaining is a self-protection strategy. It tries to prevent emotional consequences by offering too much information. In psychology, this is known as appeasement behavior, a survival response where you attempt to keep others comfortable so they don't become upset. But here's the deeper truth. Over-explaining teaches people that your confidence can be shaken. It signals that you require their approval to feel secure. It shows that your boundaries are flexible under pressure. It reveals that your internal authority is still fragile. This is why people who explain less are perceived as stronger. Their decisions feel final. Their words feel stable. Their presence feels grounded. They do not negotiate with their own voice. They trust it. And that trust is what others begin to feel. The strength of brief statements. Brief statements carry a kind of quiet firmness that long explanations cannot. A calm, short message signals clarity. A long, tangled explanation signals uncertainty. Consider the difference. I can't make it. Versus, I'm so sorry, I really wanted to come, but things got complicated and I'm not sure I'll be able to fit everything in and I feel bad. And one is grounded, the other is anxious, or that doesn't work for me. Versus, I mean, it could work maybe, but I'm not sure because I have this other thing. And I don't want to ruin your plans, but I'll try, unless one communicates self-respect. The other communicates emotional instability. The fewer words you need to express yourself, the more authority you project. You don't need to sound defensive or guilty or overly polite. You simply need to be clear, the confidence of not explaining yourself. Healthy adults make decisions. They do not justify every decision. They do not convince others to accept them. They do not ask for permission to protect their own peace. You can say, no, I'm unavailable. I'll get back to you. I'm not comfortable with that. I need time. I'd prefer something else. Without adding paragraphs of reassurance, the confidence of not explaining yourself does not come from dismissiveness. It comes from a quiet recognition that other people's reactions do not define your worth. Once you stop trying to control how others perceive you, your words become cleaner, sharper, more certain. You begin to feel grounded in your own decisions. You begin to speak from a place of inner authority. You begin to move through conversations without fear of disappointing others. You stop seeking approval and start practicing self-respect. Boundaries spoken calmly. Saying less is one of the clearest forms of boundary setting, not because it is harsh, but because it is stable. A boundary wrapped in over-explanation is weak. A boundary wrapped in apology is fragile. A boundary delivered with guilt invites negotiation. But a boundary spoken calmly and briefly, steady in tone, clear in wording, rooted in self-worth, creates stability. People respect boundaries delivered without emotional chaos, even if they don't like them. Your calm tone communicates, this decision is grounded. This decision is not emotional. This decision is final. When you use fewer words, your boundaries become more believable and more importantly, they become easier for you to uphold. Speaking without seeking permission. Someone with confidence does not constantly check how their words are being received. They don't scan people's faces for approval. They don't soften their truth to avoid discomfort. They don't dilute themselves to stay likable. Seeking permission creates dependency. Speaking without apology creates independence. You are allowed to express your truth even if someone is uncomfortable hearing it. You're allowed to make decisions even when others want a different outcome. You are allowed to have preferences without needing to justify them. Permission-seeking language sounds like, is it okay if, I hope you don't mind, but would it bother you if I, healthy language sounds like, I've decided, I won't be able to, I'm choosing, I'm not comfortable with, you are not asking, you are informing. Your tone remains gentle, but your words are steady. This is what maturity feels like, the freedom of not filling the silence. Silence makes insecure people uncomfortable. They rush to fill it, to smooth it, to prevent others from feeling awkward. But silence is not your responsibility. Silence is space. Silence is clarity. Silence is breathing room. When someone asks you a question, you do not need to respond instantly. Take your time, pause, think. The pause communicates confidence. It communicates composure. It communicates that you are not pressured by urgency. Filling silence is what anxious people do. Holding silence is what grounded people do. The more comfortable you become with silence, the more powerful your presence becomes. Letting people feel what they feel. One of the reasons people over-explain is because they want to control the other person's emotional reaction. They want to prevent disappointment. They want to avoid discomfort. They want to make sure no one misinterprets their intentions. But emotional management is not your job. When you speak clearly and kindly, your responsibility ends. The rest is someone else's internal work. If they feel disappointed, that is part of being human. If they feel confused or frustrated, that is their journey. If they react emotionally, that does not mean you were wrong. Let people feel what they feel. Your job is to speak your truth, not to engineer their reactions. This is emotional freedom, the recognition that your life is not measured by other people's comfort, when you no longer fear misunderstanding. Most over-explaining comes from fear of being misunderstood, but understanding is not something you can force. It is something others choose. You can speak clearly, honestly, and calmly, and someone may still twist your words. They may still misunderstand your intentions. They may still project their insecurities onto you. That is their interpretation, not your responsibility. When you accept that some people will misunderstand you no matter how carefully you speak, you stop bending yourself into knots trying to prevent it. You stop chasing clarity for others at the expense of clarity for yourself. You stop over-explaining your value. You stop rehearsing your truth to make it easier for others to digest. Misunderstanding is not a failure, it is a boundary, a reminder that your self-respect matters more than your image. The power of a simple sentence. A single, steady sentence can carry more influence than a paragraph of explanation. People hear brief statements differently. They sense the certainty behind them. They feel the internal alignment. They respect the lack of performance. Simple sentences like, "I'm not available." "No, thank you. That doesn't work for me. I've made my decision. I'm choosing something different," carry emotional weight. They reveal self-trust. They reveal clarity. They reveal maturity, and most importantly, they reveal that your peace is not negotiable. Your silence is not a vacancy. When you choose to say less, many people misinterpret it at first. They assume your quiet means uncertainty, that your brevity means coldness, that your calm means indifference. But silence is not emptiness. It is intention. It is direction. It is discipline. People eventually learn that your silence has meaning. They learn that your few words contain clarity. They learn that your presence carries more than your voice. You are not withdrawing. You are simplifying. You are not avoiding. You are protecting. You are not silent because you're afraid. You are silent because you're sure the strength of being done speaking. There is a moment in every conversation when unnecessary words begin. A moment when the core has already been expressed, yet the mind wants to add more, to soften, to justify, to reassure, to defend. Your strength grows when you learn to stop there. Say your truth, set your boundary, express your decision, deliver your message, and then be done. No repetition, no clarification unless asked, no emotional cleanup, no guilt. Being done speaking is one of the most powerful forms of quiet influence. It signals certainty. It signals maturity. It signals dominance over your own narrative. You are no longer trying to convince. You are simply expressing truth. Your words become stronger when they become fewer. As you practice the art of saying less without apology, your entire communication style transforms. You become more intentional, more grounded, more confident, more concise. Your words feel heavier, your presence feels stronger, your boundaries feel clearer, your silence feels meaningful. People begin to listen more closely. They stop interrupting you. They treat your sentences like decisions, not suggestions. Your voice becomes a reflection of your self-respect. Your brevity becomes a sign of your certainty. Your calmness becomes a form of quiet authority. And your silence stops being something you fear. It becomes something you own. Chapter 7. Influence through stillness and silence. The intentional use of silence. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of communication. Most people see silence as emptiness. a void to be filled, an awkward pause that requires rescue. They fear it, rush to break it, and treat it as a sign of weakness or uncertainty. But silence is not absence. Silence is direction. Silence is pressure. Silence is clarity. Silence is control. When used intentionally, silence becomes a strategic tool, one that can reveal truth, expose manipulation, redirect conversations, create respect, and deepen emotional impact. Quiet people have always had access to this power, but they often never realize how naturally it lives within them. This chapter shows you how to turn silence into a form of influence more potent than argument, louder than raised voices, and stronger than force. Influence through silence is not passive, it is purposeful, and once you understand it, you begin to see how silence shapes interaction far more than words ever could. The silence that makes people reveal themselves. When you create silence in a conversation, something predictable happens. People start to reveal more than they intended. Most individuals feel uncomfortable with quiet moments. Their minds push them to fill the space. They start talking faster, deeper, or more honestly. They correct themselves. They expose their insecurities. They soften their tone. They clarify their motives. In psychology, this is known as the discomfort effect. When silence causes the brain to open up to relieve tension, while others use noise to create confusion, you use silence to create clarity. You say nothing, and the truth comes forward on its own. This isn't manipulation. It is observation. It is letting people show you who they are without interruption. It is letting their words and the spaces between them do the revealing. Your silence becomes a mirror, and people start seeing their own reflection more clearly. The power of not interrupting. Most people interrupt without realizing they are doing so. They insert their opinions, react prematurely, try to fix, try to steer, try to defend, try to advise. But interruption is emotional noise, and emotional noise disrupts trust. When you do not interrupt, you give others a rare experience, the experience of being fully heard. People who feel heard relax. They open up, they soften, they trust. Your silence becomes an invitation to continue, to explain, to reflect, to reveal. And as they reveal more, you gain more insight, more understanding, and more emotional influence. Listening without interruption is a form of dominance that looks like gentleness. It is quiet authority. Strategic silence in conflict. Silence during conflict is one of the most powerful forms of emotional control. Not because it is passive, but because it prevents escalation. When someone raises their voice, your silence drains the energy from the conflict. When someone tries to provoke you, your silence exposes the provocation. When someone tries to intimidate you, your silence reveals their insecurity, and in conflict, silence communicates, I am not entering your chaos. I am not threatened. I am not losing myself. People expect emotional reaction. They expect defense, panic, justification, or anger. When they receive calm silence instead, their emotional strategy collapses. They are forced to slow down, to reconsider their approach, to sit with their own energy. Your silence becomes a boundary they cannot cross, a barrier between their chaos and your composure. And in the end, your silence wins the conflict without ever fighting it. Silence as a leadership trait. Look at the most respected leaders across history, and you'll see this pattern. They did not speak often, but when they did, people listened. Their power did not come from speeches alone, but from presence. A presence built on restraint, calm, and intentional silence. Leaders who speak less are perceived as more thoughtful, more serious, more trustworthy, more grounded. Silence creates the impression of depth, not artificial depth, but emotional gravity. People follow individuals who appear to think before acting. People trust those who do not speak impulsively. People respect those who hold themselves with control. Your silence becomes part of your reputation, part of your authority, part of your identity. The psychology behind conversational pressure. Silence creates psychological pressure, not aggressive pressure, but clarifying pressure. When you stay silent after someone says something, your silence asks a question without asking it. The person begins to wonder, is there more I should clarify? Do I believe what I just said? Am I being fully honest? Did they notice something I didn't? Why aren't they responding yet? Silence directs the conversation back to them. It makes them analyze their own words. It makes them reveal their real intentions. You hold a kind of power, not by dominating the conversation, but by controlling the emotional space inside it. Silence, when used intentionally, shifts pressure away from you and onto the person who speaks. This is why therapists use silence. This is why negotiators use silence. This is why leaders use silence. Because silence makes people reveal their truth. The silence that commands respect. When you respond slowly, when you take your time, when you let silence live without fear, people assume you are thinking deeply. They assume you are considering your words carefully. They assume you are confident enough not to rush. Silence communicates intelligence even before you speak. And when your eventual words are calm, measured, and precise, your silence becomes part of their meaning. Respect is rarely given to the loudest voice. Respect is given to the voice that is preceded by calm silence. Your silence becomes a message. I'm not here to prove myself. I don't need to perform for you. My certainty does not require noise. This is how quiet people gain respect without demanding it, holding silence without anxiety. To use silence intentionally, you must learn to stay present within it. An anxious silence feels shaky. A confident silence feels grounded. An anxious silence looks like fidgeting, forced smiles, nervous laughter, rushing to fill the gap, shrinking into yourself. A grounded silence looks like steady breath, relaxed posture, soft gaze, patient waiting, calm expression. People can feel the difference. When your silence is steady, others meet your energy. They slow down, they steady themselves, they align with your pace. Silence becomes the rhythm you set. This is influence without exertion, power without effort, dominance without force. The most honest moments happen in silence. If you watch closely, you'll notice something profound. People tell the truth right after silence. Someone says something and you remain quiet. They start speaking again, but this time they are more honest, more vulnerable, more open, more real. Silence pulls truth from the surface and brings it into the open. It allows emotional depth to rise, allows hidden feelings to emerge, allows clarity to form. Many of the most meaningful moments in human connection happen not because of words, but because of the silence before them. Stillness as a form of power. Stillness is not stagnation. Stillness is control. It is the ability to regulate your nervous system even when the world around you is chaotic. Stillness is internal strength. It is emotional discipline. It is maturity in motion. People who possess stillness do not chase validation, do not rush decisions, do not lose themselves in reaction, do not mirror the stress of others. Their energy feels like a foundation, solid, unmoving, reliable. Stillness is a kind of emotional gravity. It pulls people into calm. It creates safety. It commands respect. This is why the most influential individuals often speak slowly, move deliberately, and remain emotionally steady. Their stillness becomes the source of their power. Silence makes people think. When you stay silent after someone speaks, you trigger introspection. Their mind fills the space. They rethink their position. They examine their own emotions. They clarify their thoughts. They adjust their tone. Your silence becomes a catalyst for their self-awareness. You don't tell them what to think. You let them hear themselves more clearly. And because they arrive at insights on their own, the impact is deeper and longer lasting. Silence turns you into a guide without needing you to say anything. Influence without effort. You do not need to argue. You do not need to dominate. You do not need to talk more. You do not need to convince. Your silence does the work for you. People reveal themselves, conversations deepen, conflicts soften, respect grows, truth emerges. This is influence in its purest form. Influence through presence, not performance. When you master stillness and silence, people listen to you even before you speak. They feel your presence. They sense your composure. They respect your restraint. They trust your judgment. You become someone whose silence means something, someone whose stillness calms storms, someone whose quietness carries more weight than the loudest room. This is the power quiet people never realize they have. The power that doesn't shout, but reshapes everything around it. Chapter 8, Becoming a Person of Depth. The quiet identity that lasts. The emergence of a quiet identity. There comes a moment in every person's life when influence stops being something they do and becomes something they are. A moment when communication is no longer a performance, but an expression of inner strength. A moment when silence, restraint, clarity, presence, and calmness merge into an identity that feels steady, grounded, and unshakable. This chapter is about that moment. The moment where everything you've learned becomes integrated, where you stop trying to use these tools consciously and begin living them unconsciously, where speaking less becomes effortless, where influence flows naturally, where your quietness stops feeling like a limitation and begins revealing itself as your defining power. Becoming a person of depth is not about being mysterious for attention. It is about being rooted in who you are. It is about knowing yourself so well that your presence communicates more than your words ever need to. This is the quiet identity, the identity that lasts even when everything else changes, the identity built on stillness, not noise. Amth begins with self-understanding. You cannot become a person of depth if you do not know what lives within you. Depth is not created through silence alone. It is created through clarity of self. Quiet people often spend years feeling misunderstood by others, yet the deeper truth is that many of them remain partially misunderstood by themselves. They sense their emotions, yes. They feel their intuition, yes. But they rarely put language to their inner world. They rarely claim their preferences openly. They rarely articulate their boundaries clearly. When you begin understanding yourself, a transformation begins. Your choices become clearer. Your boundaries become firmer. Your emotions become less confusing. Your silence becomes purposeful. Depth emerges when you stop performing for the world and start listening inward. Every quiet person has an inner world filled with detail, with sensitivity, with observation, with intuition. But only the person who turns inward intentionally discovers how powerful that inner world truly is. Authenticity without performance. Most people in the world perform versions of themselves. They adapt their tone to match the room. They adjust their personality to fit expectations. They speak with filters designed to keep them accepted. But depth requires something different. Authenticity. Not loud authenticity. Not rebellious authenticity. But grounded authenticity. You are not trying to shock others with your truth. You are simply not abandoning it. A person of depth does not change themselves to fit every environment. They bring the same steady presence everywhere they go, not rigid, not inflexible, but integrated. They don't need approval to validate who they are. They don't need attention to feel worthy. They don't need to be the center of the room to feel significant. Their authenticity is not a performance. It is their resting state, the mystery that comes from depth. There is a kind of mystery that is artificial, the kind meant to attract attention, the kind where someone hides intentionally to appear interesting. That is not depth. That is insecurity in disguise. Real mystery comes from depth, and depth comes from internal richness. People with depth are not mysterious because they are hiding. They are mysterious because they do not need to reveal everything. They are selective. They are private. They are intentional. They reveal the parts of themselves that align with the moment and keep the rest protected. This makes others lean in. It creates curiosity. It creates respect. It creates a sense of emotional gravity, an energy that feels both calm and profound. The mystery of depth does not feel cold. It feels warm, grounded, and quietly compelling, being unaffected by external noise. Most people live at the mercy of their environment. If others are anxious, they absorb anxiety. If others are angry, they absorb anger. If others are stressed, they become overwhelmed. But a person of depth develops emotional autonomy, a grounding so stable that external noise does not dictate their internal world. This is not numbness. It is maturity. It is the ability to remain anchored even when surrounded by chaos. It is the ability to stay centered even when others lose themselves. It is the ability to regulate your own emotions instead of adopting those of the room. This quality is rare, and because it is rare, it is powerful. People naturally follow those who are emotionally sovereign, not because they are perfect, but because they feel safe. Your words become echoes. Quiet people with depth do not speak often, but when they speak, their words linger. They stay in people's minds. They repeat in people's thoughts. They echo long after the conversation ends. Why? Because depth shapes language. Your words carry emotion, experience, intention, and clarity. When you speak from depth, you speak from understanding, not reaction. Your insights feel earned, not improvised. Your tone feels grounded, not scattered. You do not rush your speech. You let your thoughts settle. You let your emotions align. You let your presence carry the weight. People listen differently when your voice comes from depth. They lean in, they remember, they adjust. Quiet voices become loud in the mind when they come from depth. Presence that speaks for you. There is a kind of presence that arrives before you speak. A presence that says more than your voice ever needs to. A presence that communicates composure, clarity, self-trust, and maturity. This presence is not created by posture alone or eye contact alone or tone alone. It is created by integration, all parts of you aligning. Your silence matching your identity. Your energy matching your intention. Your emotional state matching your words. When your presence is integrated, people feel it. It shapes how they speak to you. It shapes how they perceive you. It shapes how they treat you. Presence is quiet influence made visible. It is your identity expressed without sound. Depth creates emotional boundaries. Quiet people often struggle with boundaries early in life because they feel deeply, care deeply, and empathize easily. But depth teaches you something essential. You can care without caring. You can empathize without absorbing. You can listen without losing yourself. When you develop depth, your boundaries become internal. Not external walls, but internal clarity. You no longer say yes when your body says no. You no longer explain yourself to people who don't deserve explanations. You no longer give more than your energy can sustain. You no longer allow others to define your worth. Your boundaries stop being defensive. They become natural, instinctive, effortless. Depth protects you quietly because you no longer betray yourself. The slow pace of a deep life. Depth moves slowly. It does not rush, it does not chase, it does not scramble for validation. A deep person lives with intentional pacing. They take their time with decisions. They take their time with emotions. They take their time with relationships. They take their time with speech. The world treats speed as a sign of success, but depth treats slowness as a sign of wisdom. When your life becomes slower inside, your external world becomes clearer. Your conversations feel more grounded. Your relationships feel more authentic. Your choices feel more aligned. A slow-paced inner life creates a steady outer presence, and that steadiness is a form of power. Inner peace becomes influence. A person of depth has an inner peace that others can feel. It radiates without effort. It calms without instruction. It reassures without words. People sit differently when they're around someone with inner peace. Their breathing changes. Their tone softens. Their thoughts slow. Inner peace is contagious. Not loudly, but quietly. Not aggressively, but consistently. This is why depth becomes influence. People want to feel what you feel. They want to move at your pace. They want to borrow your steadiness. They want to experience your calm. Your peace becomes a silent teacher. You become someone others. Remember, people do not remember noise. Noise blends, noise fades, noise disappears. People remember presence. People remember depth. People remember calm. People remember truth. People remember feeling understood. You do not become memorable because you speak much. You become memorable because you carry something within you that most people do not. And they feel it, even if they cannot explain it. The quiet identity lasts because it lives beyond words, the quiet legacy. When your influence comes from depth, your legacy becomes emotional, not performative. People remember how safe they felt around you, how grounded they became in your presence, how their emotions softened, how their walls lowered, how their truths emerged, how your silence gave them clarity. Influence built on noise expires quickly. Influence built on depth endures. You don't need to dominate to matter. You don't need to speak to impact. You don't need to perform to be seen. Your quietness becomes your signature. Your depth becomes your reputation. Your calm becomes your power. Your silence becomes your influence. This is the identity that lasts. This is the quiet legacy. This is the person you were always meant to become. Final chapter, the quiet strength within you. There is a moment at the end of every journey when you pause and realize you are no longer the same person who began it. Not because you changed suddenly, but because something inside you shifted quietly. The way dawn comes without noise. The way seasons turn without permission. The way healing happens without an announcement. As you reach the end of this audiobook, you carry something now that you may not have recognized before. A calmness that belongs to you, a depth that has always been yours, a strength that never needed to raise its voice. You have learned that influence is not a performance. It is a presence built on intention, on observation, on restraint, on self-respect. You have learned that silence does not diminish you. Silence reveals you. Silence expresses your boundaries. Silence protects your energy. Silence gives your words the weight they deserve. You have learned that calmness is not avoidance. Calmness is mastery. The ability to stay centered when others lose themselves. The ability to hold still when others push you to react. The ability to influence without force, to lead without noise, to stand tall without asking for permission. You have learned that depth is not built in the light. It is built in the quiet places, the reflective moments, the inner conversations too tender to share, the pauses where truth gathers itself before becoming words. And now you step forward carrying a new understanding, that your quiet nature is not something to outgrow, but something to grow into. The world does not need more noise. It needs more clarity, more self-regulated people, more grounded presence, more steady hearts, more thoughtful minds. It needs people who can hear what remains unspoken, who can calm the room without demanding attention, who can shape conversations without dominating them, who can influence through self-control rather than volume. It needs people like you. As you move beyond this audiobook, you carry the tools, the awareness, and the inner strength to speak with intention, to listen with depth, to set boundaries with calm, and to stand in silence without apology. Your voice may be quiet, but your presence is not small. Your sentences may be few, but your meaning is not limited. Your words may be measured, but your influence is immeasurable. Walk into your life now with a deeper sense of self. Speak when your voice adds value. Remain silent when stillness holds more truth. Choose clarity over speed. Choose intention over impulse. Choose depth over performance. And let the world feel the difference, not because you are louder, but because you are truer. Your quietness is not the absence of power. It is the beginning of it, and it will take you far, farther than noise ever could. This is your new identity now, not created by this book, but revealed by it. Carry it gently, carry it fully, carry it proudly, and let the world adjust to you.